Eden Hazard calling it quits on his professional career at the age of 32. Let's hear what the longtime Belgian international had to say. Quote, "You must listen to yourself and say stop at the right time." Of course, this came in an Instagram post. "After 16 years and more than 700 matches played, I have decided to end my career. As a professional footballer, I was able to realize my dream. I have played and had fun on many pitches around the world. During my career, I was lucky to meet great managers, coaches, and teammates. Thank you to everyone for these great times. I will miss you all." Ian, you're our resident historian as we take a look at Eden Hazard's career accomplishments. Many trophies won over his time in France, England, and then finishing up with Real Madrid. Where do we start with Eden Hazard? Do we start with the time at Chelsea? Do we start with the time at Real Madrid? Do we start with the fact that it's all over at 32?
I think it's sad that it's all over at 32, but I think you start with the time at Chelsea. He was a fantastic player. I think he'd be in most people's all-time great Premier League 11. He'd certainly be in Chelsea's all-time great Premier League 11. And they've had a lot of very, very good players over the last 20 years or so. It was sad the way it ended after a big money move to Real Madrid. In the end, he hardly played there. He certainly never showed his best form. There were injuries. He probably fell out of love with the game a little, if the truth be told. But at his best, he was a wonderful player, and I think every Chelsea supporter in particular would echo those thoughts.
Frank, you agree? One of Chelsea's best ever?
One of the best ever. I mean, amazing player, and it was only normal that Real Madrid tried to employ him because of his talent and what he showed. He was capable of changing a game on his own, and in fact, I understand it a bit. I think it was a kind of an achievement to sign for Real Madrid, but you always have to prove. And I think he was already tired, maybe, or fed up, or he lost his hunger, maybe, to football, and to competitiveness, to willing to show to the people that he was still the best. He did very well at Lille. I followed him. He was very young. He was at Lille. He was already a diamond. He became crazy good at Chelsea. Then he signed for Real Madrid, and the hunger vanished, and that was all. That was all. He couldn't do what he was doing for Chelsea or for Lille before, because he didn't have the stamina for that. And it's sad, but he played 700 games. He won so many things, and maybe he was just fed up.
Well, he did, and there's no... If you scratch the surface, he was brilliant for Chelsea for long periods. But here he had the chance to elevate himself onto the next level. And he failed miserably. And quite frankly, Real Madrid didn't pay the big bucks that they paid for him with 1 year left in his contract for him to fall out of love with the game. They didn't pay for that, did they? They paid for a player who's doing what Jude Bellingham is doing now, what Karim Benzema did, what Cristiano Ronaldo and many, many others have done, who elevated themselves from clubs like Manchester United, when Sir Alex Ferguson allowed him to go because he did such a good job for him. Go on, son. Go and do it at the next level at one of the biggest clubs in the world. These guys have all done that. He failed miserably because he went over there, he took the box, and he was half-hearted. That's more than disappointment. I mean, that's not what Real Madrid paid for, right? By the way, Chelsea want to watch here. We always talk about Chelsea splashing cash and signing all these players. All right, it was pre this ownership. But they got an amazing amount of money for a guy who was clearly not fully fit. 100 million.
Is it strange if it feels like you guys are oversimplifying it by just saying like he didn't want it anymore? How does that happen to a player? How does a player go from being top of the world to making the big move to now falling out of love?
He had injuries, but he came back, and this is public knowledge, and the player said it himself. Yeah. He came back pre-season, way overweight and unfit. That's 20 years ago we were doing stuff like that, and before that. That's not the modern game, whether we like it or not. You don't come back in that kind of nick anymore, the way the game is played these days. So I'm sorry, that's on you. That is on you.
See, the only way you get to where he was at Lille and Chelsea is by commitment. He commits to it. You know, the fact that he has ability and skill, the whole thing, isn't worth a jot if you don't have the right commitment to get yourself physically and mentally into a place where all of that ability can flourish. And when he went to Real Madrid, that commitment disappeared. And I'd love to know how does he play 700 games, by the way? He was 28 when he went to Real Madrid, and he didn't play many games. So I don't know where this 700 games comes from either. Anyway, well, that's the difference.
I
tell you what, it must have been about 7 then. And you're saying we're making it sound really simple, but it is really simple because without committing to it, you don't get anywhere close to what he did. Now, the fact is, the guy was, in my opinion, was old school. Dribbling. I mean, how many times do you see people dribbling the way this guy did anymore? You just don't see it. Now you've got to pass it backwards. But it's just unfortunate we're talking about him this way because when he was at his best, he was fantastic.
Well, he said on his thing there, his post, you know when it's time to go. Well, listen, I'll simplify it even more. His time to go was a couple of years ago, right? And here's an even scarier thought, right? For a guy, by the way, who's just walked into the job as manager of the Portuguese national side, Roberto Martinez. And by the way, they're doing all right at the moment, but they're walloping all and sundry, most of them not very good. We'll see, a bit like Belgium, we'll see when they get to the elite level how they cope and how he copes. But let me tell you about him. Manager of Belgium, he fought a guy 10 months ago when the 2022 World Cup was on. He fought a guy 10 months ago was good enough to get in the Belgium side and B, captain it, right? The guy hasn't kicked the ball for 2 years. Listen, don't even think about putting me on the field because I can't move. And that's where we are with Eden Hazard's career at the end. It was an embarrassment, a bit like Martinez's decision to play him and captain him.
Ian, when we talk about his legacy, does what happened at Real Madrid overshadow everything else in the end?
Well, it does rather taint his reputation, doesn't it? That it all ended in the way that we've been describing. We don't know him intimately to know whether he actually did fall out of love with the game, but it does seem like that. But I don't know. I maybe take a little bit more of a kinder view of it than Stevie and Craig, and think that I'd say thanks for the memories. For the years where he was great at Chelsea. Only he knows why he couldn't make that move to Real Madrid, that big, glamorous move, work. I do remember this about him. I remember Jose Mourinho saying when he was right at his peak, he said, yeah, he's a fantastic player, but he does laugh and joke around in training too much. He doesn't take it as seriously maybe as he should have done. And I don't know, maybe you can do that till you're 26 and 28, but maybe a little bit later, you really do have to knuckle down to get that longevity in your career. Look, I just throw that in as a theory. I don't know if it's the truth of it, but I think he was that kind of character.
Do you remember the signs were there before Mourinho got the sack, second time around, and Antonio Conte came in? To go back to that point, I think Mourinho, who was throwing quite a few people under the bus at this point, that's kind of Mourinho-esque. He was fighting fires and everybody was getting it. But he did make some comments when he was under pressure, Mourinho, and it wasn't quite, well, it wasn't specifically named as Eden Hazard, but Eden Hazard, lo and behold, at this point, had picked up a lot of injuries. And Mourinho was suggesting that the talisman at the time at Chelsea was not pulling his weight to try and get Chelsea out of that particular conundrum. That was around 2015, I believe. So the kind of signs were there. Possibly Real Madrid obviously just didn't do their homework well enough with his fitness and all the rest of it and paid, as Stevie said, 100 million. And that's disappointing. The disappointment is he had an opportunity to go to this huge club and almost treat it like a final payday and nothing else, not from a football parlance. There didn't seem to be an ounce of desire to go there and be the player that he once was.
Eden Hazard then calling it quits on his footballing career at the age of 32.